Hi, everybody. Welcome to the webinar on Enhancing Accessibility with CBC Radio Canada's Procurement Program. My name is Boris Tia, and I'm the founder and president of Access to Success. Before we begin, I'd like to begin with acknowledging the land that we are on. I'm joining from Toronto, which is the traditional territory of many nations, including the Mississaugas of the Credit, the Anishinaabe, the Chippewa, the Haudenosaunee, and the Wendat peoples, and is now home to many diverse First Nations, Inuit, and Métis. Let's continue to recognize and deeply appreciate the historic connection of Indigenous peoples to this place as we move forward in the spirit of reconciliation. A few housekeeping items before we really dive in. Please note that the session is being recorded and captioning is available via Zoom through buttons that should be visible at the bottom of your screen. While the webinar is going on, we ask that you please stay muted. There will be, however, a period for questions at the end, and you can drop your questions in the chat at any time during the webinar. Now, as you learn, Access to Success runs ATS Labs, which is Canada's leading accelerator for accessibility startups. We provide unique programming, mentorship, resources, a global network, and funding, all of which is tailor-made to help scale accessibility startups. On a personal note, I do this because I have a couple of disabilities myself. I'm hard of hearing, and ever since I was diagnosed with hearing loss, I've dreamt of a future where there would be smart contact lenses, smart contacts that would let me use artificial reality-based live captioning for my day-to-day life. That doesn't exist, but there are a lot of people, a lot of business owners, a lot of entrepreneurs, like many of you here today, who are working on a lot of other dreams. And at Access to Success, we want to help you make those dreams come true. And the best part is, we're not doing this all on our own. We work with over 200 speakers and mentors around the world, all of whom specialize in accessibility innovations and entrepreneurship. And they are the people who come in and share their journeys and their learnings with you. Most of all, we do what we do to help you get to scale. We've been doing this since 2019, and across 5 cohorts that we've done so far, we've worked with 60 startups, delivered over 200 hours of programming, and helped these startups raise over $26 million in funding. But most importantly, the startups that we've worked with so far have gone on to benefit over 950,000 people with disabilities today. Before we go into today's session with CBC Radio Canada, I invite you to sign up for our newsletter, which is the easiest and best way to stay updated on our programming, on the next cohort, on funding opportunities, on upcoming events, and free resources that we share all year round. You can scan the QR code on the screen, or you can visit accesstosuccess.ca/newsletter-sign-up. And with that, I would like to acknowledge CBC Radio Canada, without whom we wouldn't be here today. We've been working with a lot of partners, and I have to say CBC Radio Canada is one that I'm always very excited to work with because they understand what accessibility and digital accessibility really means. With that, I would like to invite and welcome today's speakers. Joining us today, we have Annick Champoux, who's the Environmental, Social, and Governance Procurement Program Advisor. Annick places sustainability at the heart of her professional and personal life. She joined CBC Radio Canada in 2022 after more than 16 years of career with the Government of Canada. Annick helps the organization achieve its environmental targets and footprint with the implementation of a sustainable procurement program. She also wants to have a positive impact on communities with the Sustainable Procurement Program that promotes a more accessible, inclusive, and diversified supply chain. Next up, we have Boris Tia, who is the manager responsible for accessibility at CBC Radio Canada. Since August 2024, Boris has been leading efforts to make the organization more accessible, both for its audiences and its employees. His work focuses on ensuring that CBC Radio Canada remains an inclusive and welcoming environment. Last but not the least, we have Ash McAskill, who is an ally to the deaf, disability, and older adult communities. Currently, she is working as the Senior Specialist of Accessible Procurement at CBC Radio Canada, in which she is collaborating with an array of stakeholders to co-develop new inclusive policies and practices. She holds a PhD in Communication Studies from the Concordia University and completed a postdoctoral fellowship appointment from the University of Guelph. With that, I would like to pass it over to Annick Champoux.
Thank you so much, Baron. Give me 2 seconds. I will share my screen. Please tell me if that is okay. Are you seeing my screen? Yeah, okay. Thank you. Okay, so thank you so much thank you, Baron, for the nice introduction. On behalf of CBC Radio Canada, I want to thank you, Access to Success, and all of you for being here today. Today, we are going to talk about how CBC Radio Canada enhance accessibility through our procurement program. So let's get started. Whoops. No. Okay, let's get started. So we'll start by a little introduction. I hope that you all know CBC Radio Canada, but just to make sure, we will talk a little bit about it. Then Boris will talk about the CBC Radio Canada National Accessibility Plan. And I will come back to talk a little bit more about the procurement program, but then Ash will complete by talking more specifically to accessibility in our procurement program. Afterwards, we will have time for questions. I just want to say that on the slide, we have a small image, and you will recognize this image. It's two people from a diverse area or different background that hug the Mother Earth, and that represents collaboration and support for sustainability, but also for accessibility. So who are we? CBC Radio Canada is the national public broadcaster, and our mission is really to celebrate Canadian cultural and support democratic life. We do so with a wide range of content on the television, the radio, and the web. Our values is integrity, creativity, relevance, and inclusiveness. On the screen, you see a lot of our icons, and you probably know some of our CBC Radio Canada content, but maybe some are new to you. For example, we see GEM, we see Ici Tout.tv icon, and one of my favorite that I discovered when I joined CBC Radio Canada is MAJ, which is a specialized web content for youth and children. So check them out if you don't know some of these icons and services. Now I'll let Boris Tia continue with our accessibility plan.
Thank you, Annick. Hello, everyone. I'm very happy to be here with you guys. Let's start with a little description of myself. I am an Asian man in my 40s with black hairs. For a reason that I don't know why, I start to get a few gray ones. I have brown eyes. Today I'm wearing a blue shirt and a gray blazer. It's such a pleasure to be here as the manager in charge of accessibility. So people often ask me what that's all about. And like Varun said in the introductions, in terms of accessibility, CBC Radio Canada, we have a double responsibility. On one hand, we are a public broadcaster, so it's very important for us to be accessible for all our audiences in Canada. And in another hand, like many other companies, we are an employer. So my role is to make sure that we are also accessible for all our employees. My position was created before we launched our first national accessibility plan. So let's talk about it right now. We can jump to the other slide, Annick. So what I want you to know is before we wrote the first line of this accessibility plan, our mindset was clearly to have a plan that been built and made for and by disabled persons. So what we did exactly, we did in consultations with many people across Canada. So on this slide, you'll see many pictures of our consultations. You will see disabled person in a library, sometime in our office. Some of them are on a wheelchair, some of them are not. So we did many provinces. We talk about our employees. We talk about many Canadians. So what was the outcomes of these consultations? I think we go to the other slide. So the outcome of this consultation was we realized that there was a lot of area that we still have margin for improvement to be fully accessible by 2040. So this is our vision, is to be, if you want to, how can I say that? If we want to be fully accessible, we need to have an ambitious visions. And to be a world leader, when we put that in our vision, it's not nothing. If, for example, if you want to be able to run 20 kilometers, if you aim for 40, you will be probably sure that you will be able to run a 20 kilometers. So to have a very ambitious vision was very important for us. If we jump to the other slide, how are we going to do that? So we decide to focus on 3 specific focus areas. On the first one is offering a very accessible and inclusive experience to our employees. How we're going to do that? To remove barriers to foster a very inclusive workplace. On this point, you'll see a picture of one of our disabled reporter in actions. Okay. So the second focus area is to reflecting disability in our stories and storytelling. That's simple. It's just to make sure that disabled persons across Canada can see themselves in our context. And the last point, championing accessibility in everything we do. So our ambition is to be a public broadcaster for whom considering accessibility issues become as natural as breathing, as natural as breathing. So fittingly, this is exactly what we're trying to do today, because one of our commitments in this plan is to improve our procurement process, to make it more accessible and inclusive. And now it's time for me to call on Annick, who will give you more information about our procurement program. Annick.
Thank you, Boris. So first, I forgot to describe myself. So thank you, Boris, for reminding me that I didn't do that. So I'm a woman in her 40s. I have red glasses and a green coat with a white shirt. And yeah, I also have a little bit of gray hair, but I covered it under some highlights. So, okay, let's talk about our services. I like this map. So on the screen, you see a map with a lot of yellow dots that represents our buildings and our transmission power lines. So I just want to say as you can see on the map, we have more across Canada, lower, close, to the border, but we're from coast to coast to coast. And you will understand why I'm talking a little bit about that a little bit later. So we wanted to talk a little bit about the procurement process, and maybe procurement is new to you. So we are a Crown corporation. It's very important for us to have integrity at first on our procurement program and policies, and also to be very transparent. We are subject to Canadian Free Trade Agreements. So we do have some rules that we have to abide by. We cannot do what we want. And that is the reason why we solicit bids the way we do, because of the Canadian Free Trade Agreement. So less than $500,000, we do procurement process by invitation. What does that mean is that we ask suppliers, specific suppliers, to compete, and this is the procurement process. And that's why we ask you, and I will explain more later, the portal. That's why we ask for suppliers to subscribe to our portal to know who wants to do business with us, so that we can invite you or them to our procurement process. We'll talk more later on the portal. Next, when it's more than $500,000, it has to be public. And the way we are doing it at CBC Radio Canada, we are publishing our procurement opportunities on MERX. MERX is a platform where you can see the opportunities and you can bid, your organization can bid. And so that's what we're doing. And that's to be fully transparent. So 2 ways of doing procurement processes. Now, maybe you're asking yourselves, but what is CBC Radio-Canada buying? So we're buying lots of things. I will not cover everything, but I will start from what is more common to the ones that we buy a little less. So as you saw on the map, we have a lot of facilities. So with no surprise, this is what we buy the most. So we have building operation services, construction services, but as I said, we are a very digital company. You know, we are on the web, on television and radio. So of course, we have a lot of hardware and software with support. Then we have media equipment and digital platforms, transmission equipment and services. And the fourth one is professional services. So we do have, you know, consultant and marketing services. And finally, we have general goods and services. And yes, we do sometimes buy products and services for people with disability. So that would fit into this sentence. Thank you for not putting lines on this slide. So now let's talk a little bit about sustainable procurement. Also, maybe that's new for you. So sustainable procurement is really doing procurement in a new way, meaning including social and environmental consideration into the procurement process. And that's already ongoing at CBC Radio Canada. We have a directive on sustainable procurement, and so it's mandatory to take some action. So in the social pillar, the goal is really to reduce barriers for suppliers from underrepresented groups, but also reduce barriers for people with disabilities. So really having everyone able to participate in our procurement. Now the environmental pillar is really to promote environmental product and services, as well as working with vendors with sustainability practices. So in a nutshell, this is what sustainable procurement is. And actually, next slide, and I recognize I need to do a little bit more image description. So on the next slide, you can see the strategic priorities and support. So sustainable procurement supports 4 of our strategic priorities. The environmental strategy. On the screen, you can see the cover page of our Greening Our Story strategy with the mountain. Sustainable procurement also supports equity, diversity, and inclusion. So our strategy is named Progress and Progress. On the front, you have an image of people from different TV shows that are from different communities. That's what you see there. Then we see accessibility. So sustainable procurement also supports accessibility, but Ash will tell you more about accessible procurement in a minute. And you can see on the screen the front page of our national accessibility plan that Boris talked about. It's a purple background with a lot of accessible tech in yellow and turquoise with an eye on it. And then Indigenous relations. So sustainable procurement also supports the Indigenous reconciliation. And you also see the front page of our national strategy that is green with some leaves and other nature theme. So, okay. Now, more interesting to you, what did we commit to do in the National Accessibility Plan for procurement? So 3 things: launch our supplier portal, launch a vendor code of conduct, and integrate accessibility in ICT procurement. On the left, you see the front page of the National Accessibility Plan again. But before we dive a little bit more, I just want to talk about supplier diversity and how in sustainable procurement, we support vendors from underrepresented groups. So we have 5 underrepresented groups, and when you are a vendor that is 51% owned, managed, and operated by racialized people, women, people from LGBTQ2+, Indigenous people, are veterans and people with disabilities, you are one of these underrepresented groups, and we're looking for you because of our sustainable procurement initiative. So in order for us to know about your company and for you to be able to be invited to our procurement process, we did do a supplier portal. So in our supplier portal, the goal really is to diversify our supply chain, as I said, to reduce the barriers for suppliers from underrepresented groups. So you have all our normal questions on the supplier portal, but then we ask you to identify if you're from an underrepresented group, if you're certified from a supplier councils. And this supplier portal is what we're using, the information in that supplier portal to find and invite suppliers from underrepresented group. So maybe I can go back. So that's why if you're, if you suggest, if you have options or offer goods and services for disability or disabled people, or if you're owned and you're, if your company is owned by someone with a disability, we want to hear from you and we want to work with you. Now the vendor code of conduct, this is the other thing we've done for sustainable procurement. So we have a vendor code of conduct. On left, you can see the front page. Our vendor code of conduct is someone with a camera that has the logo of CBC Radio Canada in red. We have a vendor code of conduct because we want to respect human rights, ethic, and the environment. We want our vendor to abide by it as well. And we want them to have sustainable and inclusive policies and practices. And when I'm talking about inclusive, I'm also talking about accessibility. So in our vendor code of conduct, vendors are encouraged to promote accessibility within their workplace and to incorporate universal design principle. On this slide, you see an image from the launch of the National Accessibility Plan. I believe it was in 2023, and you see people with lived experience. You see someone in a wheelchair, and you see Catherine Tate as well on this image. So in a nutshell, I hope everyone understood. I know it's new and it's not always easy to understand sustainable procurement. The goal is really we have a directive. It's mandatory to invite suppliers from underrepresented group. It's also mandatory to include sustainability. And through support and collaboration, that's how we're implementing sustainable procurement. And that also includes accessibility, because we want to invite suppliers from underrepresented group and be as accessible as possible. And with this part, I will let Ash continue the presentation.
Hi, everyone. I'm going to start off by giving myself a visual description. So my name is Ash McAskill. I am a white female with brown hair that's tied back with one of those alligator clips. If you're curious, it's a pink alligator clip. I'm wearing glasses that have a cat eye shaped. And at the top of my glasses, there's white and blue kind of spectacle, like kind of designs. I'm wearing a dress that is black and white. The white is the floral part. And what you can't see is I have a big bump. I am 35 weeks pregnant. So while I present today, I might be a bit breathy, but I'm okay. And I also have one of my cats sitting on my lap right now. So fun times. But I'm really excited to be here with all of you. I encourage you all to share more in the chat about where you're from and what vendor you are. I also want to just give a thanks to our ASL interpreter, James, for working with us today, and our colleagues at Access to Success. So what is accessible procurement? Believe it or not, before I started my position at CBC Radio Canada, I didn't know what procurement was, let alone accessible procurement. I come from an accessibility background, but this is still a very new field. So when I say the words accessible procurement, what I'm talking about is literally the process of purchasing goods, services, or construction projects that consider access needs of Canadians and employees with disabilities. So what's really important, and I'm sure a lot of you also are aware of, is often accessibility is seen as an afterthought. Something is created, and then we start thinking about accessibility. What accessible procurement does is think about how we can prioritize and make sure that the importance of all accessibility needs are looked at from the beginning of that procurement process. So right when someone does something called a sourcing request, when they're saying, this is what I need and what I'm looking for, all the way down to the negotiation process with a vendor. We want to make sure that all templates are accessible. The platforms that we use are accessible. And the materials that we buy and use are accessible for people with all sorts of needs. So that's really what accessible procurement is. It's very new, but it's an important field that I'm sure a lot of us are engaging more with. So we'll go to the next slide. So according to our National Accessibility Plan, which just to let you know, at the end of this presentation, we will be sending an email to all registrants of this webinar, and we'll make sure to have an alternative text form with all of the links that we were discussing. So whether it be like a link to our different plans that we just talked about, our vendor code of conduct, and also that what we really want to encourage you today is to do that new supplier portal so we can learn more about your company. So we'll have that all ready for you. So don't worry if you're like, where does this all this? We're going to be sending that to you. So according to our National Accessibility Plan, these are the main goals that promote accessible procurement for CBC Radio Canada. The first one is we want to improve the accessibility of the sourcing process. We want to make sure that when someone puts in a bid or is looking for specific equipment, that is user-friendly for them, and that the process of going through, understanding how to post that request is accessible. And again, that's really about templates, like making sure that things are screen reader, accessible, making sure that we are using plain language in the way that we are endorsing it. These are all very important things. The next goal is developing and evaluating the relevant technical criteria for accessibility for the good or service to be purchased. So for some of you, for example, that are developing products and goods and services, as we all know that there are different accessibility standards that we need to follow, whether that they're legal or they're more so been adopted as a standard. One of them, which I'll talk about in a minute, is something that we call the EN, which has just been adopted by Accessibility Standards Canada. So we want to make sure that as a corporation, that all of the things that we are doing meet those standards and meet those regulations, particularly even with construction. And of course, and this is a big one, engaging and educating our suppliers. So engaging and understanding, what type of suppliers are out there that are making goods and services that prioritize accessibility. And also for people that are new to accessibility, how can we work with them to promote, these standards so that they can start thinking about how they can implement them in their in the way they design their goods. And this is something that I'll talk about it also in a second, but a major point that I want to say today is we actually are doing a survey. A part of our creating our directive on accessible procurement is we want to make sure that we are, engaging with vendors to understand the market readiness of new standards, specifically the EN. And at the end, we'd love to get your feedback if you'd like to participate with that vendor survey, so we can understand where you are with your accessibility journey and also your market readiness specifically for the EN. So we'll go to the next slide. So when I talk about, I know I say the EN a lot, and I'll explain why, but the big abbreviation for this new standard is the CANASCEN 301 549 20 24. And what this is this is a standard that was created in Europe, and it's a digital accessibility standard that has been adopted by many different countries. It goes beyond what we often would call the WCAG, the web, I think it's Web Communication Accessibility Guide. And this is something that's very thorough. So the EN is what we often call it. Is a set of guidelines and requirements for information and communication technology, or abbreviation would be ICT, related products and services to make digital content accessible to people with disabilities. So you're probably wondering, well, why did Canada adopt this new standard? Why is this important? So it's very new. So if you're just hearing it for the first time, it's okay. It was new to me even when I started this job. So standards, Canada Accessible Standards adopted this new standard at the end of May. It's also been adopted by different countries who often will maybe amend it based on, different local legalities. But it thinks thoroughly through the different types of needs of people with disabilities, from sensorial to hearing to speech. I think AI is something that needs to be more implemented in it. So those of you that work in AI, this is something that, I think is still very new. But it's a standard that will be a requirement for a lot of you. And so I definitely think if you haven't looked at it yet, I highly recommend to check it out. We'll go to the next slide. So when we talk about accessibility and procurement, how can you implement that? So specifically at CBC Radio Canada, the way that we've done this is through consultations. So we've done already, kind of like what Boris said about before we made the plan, we wanted to make sure that we consulted with different communities. So in our case, at CBC Radio Canada, we have done consultations with internal, so colleagues, employees at CBC Radio Canada, whether that be our procurement specialists, people that we often will call advocates and allies of accessibility, so people that have advanced the National Accessibility Plan, or those that have lived experience of being a part of the deaf and disability community. And also our IT experts has been really important. And another group that's been very important to us is something that we call our functional experts. So people that work closely with us to help advise us on best practices of accessibility during the procurement process. And then, of course, we want to create a directive. And what a directive does is it formalizes that process of how we need to understand accessibility and implement it in a formal way at CBC Radio Canada. And then, of course, create an accessibility toolbox. So ensuring that we have templates that are available, a really strong questionnaire for our vendors around how to best understand their accessibility practices and journeys, and also just a strong understanding of standards, for example, like the EN, and colleagues that we can go to really best understand, especially digital accessibility practices. All of this together creates a successful way of how to best understand accessible procurement and how to implement accessibility in procurement processes. We'll go to the next slide. And so this slide is very much about how can you work with us and learn more about how to work with CBC Radio Canada, but not even that, but maybe at any vendor at large or any company at large. So for our case, as Annick told you previously, sign up for that supplier portal. It's just about creating a profile, probably maybe take maybe 5 to 7 minutes, not even. Just sharing your information of your company and what you do and who you are. And that will help kind of add you to giving more information to CBC Radio Canada. Of course, also finding opportunities on Mercs. So Mercs is a website that is used to post these post requests. So if at any time CBC Radio Canada is looking for, say, a specific type of broadcasting equipment or cloud networking source, If it's a public one, we will put it on Merck's, and you can find that opportunity there and more information on how to follow up. Also, as I said previously, participate in our upcoming survey on accessibility. We want to know more about you and where you're at in your accessibility journey. We understand that for some people, this is very new, and we want to just understand where you are so we can meet you there and collaborate. Of course, and this is a really important one, especially for those of you that are working with IT-related services and goods, information technology and communication services and goods. Really start thinking about how you can get to that place of being compliant with the EN. If it's still new to you, I would highly advise you to work with an accessibility consultant to help you get there. But of course, as any corporation knows, this is still very new to people, and it takes time to get there. And then, of course, follow our progress at CBC Radio-Canada's progress with the National Accessibility Plan. We always share information and updates on our website, and we would, love to hear from you if you ever have feedback. So I'm going to wrap it up there, and I'll pass it back to Annick to close today's presentation.
Thank you very much, Ash. So thank you so much for being with us. Please take this email address if you want to participate in our survey. So esg.proc, proc is PROC, @cbc.ca. And of course, we will send you this PowerPoint presentation. You will have this email address. You also have the link to our corporate website. As Ash said, we're looking for you to support not only our sustainable procurement initiative, but also our accessibility procurement initiative. And if ever you have, you can provide some goods or service that are for the disability community, or if you're a vendor from an underrepresented group, we would love to hear from you. So thank you very much on behalf of CBC Radio-Canada, and thank you for Access to Success. And please don't be shy and ask questions. We love questions and we like discussions. So thank you.
Thank you, Annick. Hi, everyone. This is Boris Tia speaking. And with that, we are in the Q&A portion of today's webinar. So folks, if you have questions, as Annick said, please don't be shy. Drop your questions in the chat, and I'd be happy to ask them to our speakers today. While you all think of what questions to ask, I did have one question. Can you share a little bit more about what happens after somebody signs up for Merck's or after they see an opportunity come up on your portal?
Perfect. I'll take this question. So so there's two things. We'll start with the portal and then we'll go to Merck. So because it's two different paths. So when you subscribe to the portal, you put the more information, the more specific information you can. Make sure, so I have a couple of elements for you. Make sure you check the right categories of product and service, because this is when we look for vendors from underrepresented group, what we do, we have an internal tool and we have some keywords that looks into the description that you entered and the categories you entered, and we look for a match. So let's say I need adaptive software. I might put some keywords like adaptive software, or if I'm looking for a vendor owned by someone with disability, I can check that as well. And I'm trying to have the best match to invite suppliers. So make sure you subscribe to the portal. Once you subscribe to the portal, you can send an email address to exg.proc@cbc.ca. However, we do not have the capacity to come back individually or to meet one-on-one. So don't have that expectation. Really, subscribing to the portal is how to best improve your opportunity with CBC Radio-Canada. Now let's talk about Merck's. Merck's is really a public link and it's a public procurement. So you're really competing with other vendors on this unique procurement. Every procurement, they have different technical financial evaluation. It's all written. I know it's not that simple, so it's not a 2-page kind of document, but if you can supply what's requested in MERX, I strongly recommend that you read the document and you compete and you try to win this bid to be a supplier from CBC Radio-Canada. Now, if you're having some barriers, because we know that right now, we want to improve. We know our procurement is not totally accessible. Please do not be shy to write your requests, for example, for templates or any requirement you need to have the opportunity to bid. If you have any barriers, please send a request to the person in MERX, so the procurement officer or the procurement specialist, and we will make sure to accommodate. So you're welcome.
Thank you, Annick. And so, folks, yes, we will be sending a copy of the recording for this session as well as the slides sometime either later this week or next week, so you can keep an eye out for that. And then I see there's a question from Jonathan Green. Jonathan, go ahead. John, are you there?
There we go. How's that better?
Yep, that's good. Thank you.
My name is John Breen, and to stay with our theme of describing ourselves related to our gray hair, I have a white Santa Claus beard and curly brown hair. I have a plaid shirt, and I have a service dog wandering around here somewhere, looking as intent as she can at the present. I'm the principal of Breen & Associates Consulting, and I'm also a research associate in the Faculty of Medicine at UBC. And my work and research is all around employment and disability, particularly around attitudes within the workplace. My question is whether you folks at CBC have also looked at workplace attitudes as these relate to the accessibility plan that you've explained. And thank you very much. I really appreciate the detail that you've gone into, but I'm wondering if that other issue of workplace attitudes, not only as they apply to vendors, but also as they apply to CBC, have been taken into consideration when developing this program. Part of my work these days is delivering online disability awareness training programs specific to the workplace. And I'm wondering where you are with this topic.
If I may, I will answer the first part of this question. First of all, thank you, Jonathan, for your question. The title of our accessibility plan is Removing Barriers. Okay, so of course, attitudinal barriers is the barriers that we can see in almost every workplace. Okay, so yes, we are considering this. Yes, we are doing a lot of effort to I will say, to create an internal culture that of managers and employers who are more aware about these kind of barriers, and I am including this kind of attitudinal barriers. So this is our first national accessibility plan. So it's like building a new house, Jonathan. So we have to start with a very strong foundation to be fully aware about all these kind of barriers, and then we will improve it through the years, you know. At the end of the next year, we will start thinking about the next step of our accessibility plan. So, of course, there's a lot of area that we still have margin for improvement, to be honest with you. But we are starting with a strong commitment from our high-level management in terms of willingness to make things change. And of course, attitudinal barriers is something that our high-level management are fully aware about. So that will be my answer for you. Thank you for your great job, Jonathan. Yeah.
Thank you, Boris. As they say, accessibility is never done. So I appreciate you acknowledging that. Any other questions, folks? Please feel free to drop them in the chat.
While we wait for question, maybe I can say that we're very proud to have internal training on accessibility because we understand that raising awareness is also one of the first steps, making sure employees, management understand what is accessibility, what does it mean, how does it apply in different areas. So we're also working on that.
Thank you. I haven't seen any more questions come in, so I will ask one last question, which is a lot of the people here I know are relatively earlier on in their journey as disability-led businesses, and they may not have the same resources as a lot of the vendors and large organizations like CBC Radio Canada might work with via Merck's in particular. So would you have any advice for the entrepreneurs here who are early on, but are passionate, are capable, and eager to work with a crown corporation like CBC Radio Canada?
I'll start and maybe Boris or Ash, you can complete. So of course, please subscribe to the portal. I would also recommend looking into the supplier councils that certified suppliers owned by underrepresented group. There is one specific for veterans and people with disability. I believe the acronym, and I'm going by heart, IWSCC, I believe. So that's if you want to have more opportunities to do some benchmarking, to do some I don't remember what's the name they say, but like matchmaking. This is a place where it's really the goal is really to match what you sell and what product you have as an accessibility standpoint to what a crown or an organization needs. So that would be my recommendation. But yes, at CBC Radio Canada, it's really through our portal that we do this. But we also participate in these matchmaking events in different supplier councils. So that's why I'm talking about it.
That's great advice. Anything to add, Boris or Ash?
Yeah, I mean, I think I think I can say a lot here. Firstly, you're doing it by just being a part of being a part of and working with people like Access to Success. Um, as someone that's still very new to procurement and understanding, what is a company and how do you commercialize something? It's really great to work with someone like Varun and Stephen and colleagues at Access to Success that can give you those tools to build confidence, right? Because believe it or not, even someone like me, I was like, how I would love to work for CBC one day. And then I was able to get this position. And often it's just about that very first kind of first step is, as Annick said, is to sign yourself up to our new portal, which we will be sharing all those links at the end of this at the end of this. Once the presentation is shared, we'll share all those links. But it's also about knowing and believing in yourself too. We all start from somewhere, right? We all start from somewhere, and then we build those network and those connections. And that's exactly what you're doing today by some of you just including, this is what I do, this is where I'm coming from, these are the types of products that I'm selling. Accessibility and the field of accessibility is the coolest network to be a part of personally. And we are wide and big. Just going on LinkedIn and sharing something about what you do and the type of business that you're looking for, building that network is key. And CBC can absolutely be a part of that network that you're building. We are always looking to work with different types of communities, and sometimes it's a very specific thing that we're looking for. That some of those bigger vendors that can't supply. So please know that, just because if you're starting off small or you're a bit intimidated by the idea of like, oh, can I even work for a big corporation? Yes, you can. And you're doing that today by just attending this amazing webinar that has been presented by such a wonderful organization, Access to Success. So you're doing that now, and kudos to all of you. And you can find all three of us on LinkedIn as well. And we'd love to connect with you and just be a part of your network. So yeah, and of course, doing the vendor survey as well, which we will share at a later time. But Boris, I'm sure you have something else you maybe want to add, because working with us is awesome, and I'm sure you have lots of things to say too.
Well, what a great answer, Ash. What can I say after this, I'm just kidding. I just want to repeat something really important that you said at the end of your presentation, Ash. And the best advice I can give you to all the entrepreneurs is to make sure that you're fully aware about our progress in terms of accessibility, so you can see how your offer and your business can fit with our needs. So it's a relationship. So it has to come to both sides. It has to start with a fit in a certain way. So I said, be fully aware about everything, every documentation that we have produced about accessibility. Take the time to read our accessibility plan. We work so hard on it. So I think it's a great beginning for you guys. So that will be my advice. Yeah.
That is some very, very good advice, and as good a spot as any to conclude today's webinar. I would like to take the opportunity to thank Annick, Boris, and Ash for sharing your work with us today. And of course, thanks to James for working as our interpreter today. We appreciate you. And thank you, everybody, for joining. We appreciate it. We will reach out with a recording and the slides and links and other resources. In the meantime, make sure you sign up for our newsletter to stay updated on more opportunities such as this. Thank you so much, everybody, and enjoy the rest of the day. Bye now.